Hello, my name is Douglas Hedwig and I am a composer. I'd like to introduce you today to some of my music and talk a bit about my creative process, musical background, and some influences and sources of inspiration. I find that I'm drawn to composing in a rather wide range of musical styles, but central to my approach are contrast and variation. Some of my works are tonal, while others explore the dramatic and expressive realm of atonality. Some tend to be lyrical in nature, while others are more angular and declamatory. A few pieces are for solo instruments, while others for full symphony orchestra, choir, and large ensembles. I often find inspiration in philosophy and poetry. For instance, in late March 2023, just prior to the creation and release of this video, my first symphony, entitled Journey in Four Movements, received its world premiere performed by the Chattanooga Symphony Orchestra. This work explores the mythical and universal story of inspiration, adventure, adversity, and positive change that the noted American scholar and philosopher Joseph Campbell has referred to as the hero's journey. But sometimes, for instance with my more experimental works such as Transonic Awakenings, which is a fixed media electronic piece, I'm more concerned with purely abstract concepts of form and structural architecture. World music too is a very meaningful source of inspiration in my music, particularly the music of India and South Asia, and you will hear two works of mine later in this video that illustrate that. Also, I continue to be influenced by the fusion style sometimes referred to as third stream that combines elements of jazz with Western classical music. And in several of my works, I have mined the riches of the medieval and Renaissance periods in styles I have described as neo-Gothic and neo-Renaissance. In Italian, it's neo-Rinascimento, since I am drawn to the Italian Renaissance arts. Later in this video, I'll present a work that incorporates this approach. All that said, however, I just as frequently find my inspiration in a more abstract general sense of drama and contrast, an idea that then drives the formation of musical themes, rhythms, harmonies, orchestration, and so forth that align with these ideas, emotions, and feelings. So, it might be appropriate here to give you a bit of background on my musical background that I believe may shed some light on my composition and output. Prior to turning my full attention to composition around 2012, I was a professional trumpet player in New York City for many years. In addition to performing with the Metropolitan Opera Orchestra at Lincoln Center for 27 years, I was also very active in the recording studios in the late 20th century, playing on over 40 recordings on major labels in a wide variety of musical styles and ensembles. It was during these early years I also played a great deal of new music and had the pleasure of working very closely with many wonderful composers of the time, such as Steve Reich, Vivian Fine, Alan Hovhaness, Robert Starr, Vladimir Yushevsky, Charles Dodd, Richard Adler, and many others, several of whom wrote works especially for and in collaboration with me. From each of these composers, I tried to learn everything I could, and I believe it is safe to say that I absorbed stylistic elements of each of these artists while developing my own distinctive compositional voice with study and analysis of other works, of course. In view of this musical background, then, perhaps it's appropriate to begin my musical examples with a live video recording of a recent work I composed for 6 trumpets, commissioned and performed by Eric Sierveld and the wonderful Altus Trumpet Ensemble. The piece is entitled Udmaya, and it takes its title from the Sanskrit word meaning to make known or to announce, as by means of the conch shell or trumpet. Inspired by the classical vocal music of India, the work is a fusion of traditional Indian and Western classical styles. So, here now is Udmaya. Another work of mine that draws upon folk and classical music from various world cultures is Movable Borders, a work for string quintet, 2 violins, viola, cello, and double bass. Composed in 2017, it is in 3 movements, and the work is inspired by much of the travel I've done throughout the world. The first movement, Journey, draws upon musical styles typical of Hungary, Argentina, and a bit of American jazz fusion. The third movement is inspired by the dance music of Serbia and Croatia. It's quite active. But movement 2, a video recording of which I will play next in this presentation, is entitled Hymn with a subtitle of Gitannali. Gitannali is the title of a set of poems by the Indian poet Rabindranath Tagore. For me, the feeling of belonging in societal and cultural terms is an important element in this piece. Emigration, immigration. The idea of being a citizen of the world is infused into much of my work. That is to say, where do we belong and where do we want to belong? Perhaps it's best to understand every individual in the world as being first a citizen of the world, and only then within the context of their own culture, time, and place. I feel this may aid in bringing the world into a time of greater peace and mutual understanding. In the next musical selection, then, Hymn from Musical Borders, you will hear and see some of this idea presented in not only my music, but also a visual representation of these ideas in a video I created to accompany this work. You may notice a certain meditative quality in the work, and that, of course, is intentional. I find that, for me, the process of composing is essentially a process of self-discovery and increased self-knowledge. And indeed, if in the listening of my music, some of this experience may be transferred or inspire another listener, that would be wonderful. Anyway, here now is Hymn. Travel to space is another interest of mine, not just other countries and continents. The idea of space travel was in fact the inspiration for my song cycle, New Worlds. It was composed in honor of the 50th anniversary of the historic Apollo lunar landing in 1969 and is a sort of musical exploration of the wonders of space and interstellar discovery. Completed in 2020, New Worlds is for soprano, trumpet, and piano, and includes settings of 3 poems by poets living in 3 different centuries, the 17th, 18th, and 20th centuries. I've chosen to present here the first of these songs based upon the writing of the English poet John Dryden, 1631 to 1700. This song is entitled Lunar Neighbors, and the text is extracted from Dryden's Annus Mirabilis. It is, to my mind, an excellent early example of the idea of space travel at a time when it was entirely a philosophical imagining. The text I chose from Dryden in my work is as follows. Instructed ships shall sail to quick commerce, by which remotest regions are allied, which makes one city of the universe, where some may gain and all may be supplied. Then we upon our globe's last verge shall go, and view the ocean leaning on the sky. From thence our rolling neighbors shall we know, and on the lunar world securely pry. Indeed, in much of my vocal music, I have been drawn to exploring philosophical and spiritual themes. This includes my 5-song Emily Dickinson cycle, as well as a work I'll begin on shortly, which is a setting of some of the poetry of Ralph Waldo Emerson. Also in one of my works, I have set the music, the poetry of Rabindranath Tagore. But rather than delving deeply into the philosophical implications or underpinnings of Dryden's text, in Lunar Neighbors, which you're about to see and hear, I have chosen a somewhat lighter, more easygoing, even at times ironic rumination on what was at the time, as I said, purely abstract and imaginary vision of travel into the reaches of outer space. I would especially like to point out that in Lunar Neighbors, you may notice some of the jazz influence I referred to in my introduction as being one of the important elements of my compositional style. So, to offer a quick introduction, Lunar Neighbors begins with a brief flourish meant to evoke the blast-off of a rocket, perhaps, with the following lyrical bel canto section suggestive of floating and weightlessness. And in between, the piano interjects, at times you might say interrupts, with jazz-influenced commentaries. So here now is a lovely performance of Lunar Neighbors by soprano Julianne Olson, pianist Vanessa Nguyen Wei, and trumpeter Brian Reichenbach.
By which we
During the COVID pandemic, I reread Dante's epic trilogy, The Divine Comedy. Generally considered the preeminent work in Italian literature, it is certainly one of the greatest works of world literature. Although written over 750 years ago, I find this tale very relevant today, certainly as relevant as it has ever been, I think. And indeed, I was moved to compose a work for solo guitar inspired by this epic poem. You'll hear a live recording of it following my introduction. So the full title of this work is L'Altre Stelle, Reverie on the Divine Comedy. It was, as I say, inspired by the Divine Comedy by Dante Alighieri, who lived 1265 to 1321. The title of the work is derived from the final words of the epic, L'amor che muove il sole e l'altre stelle, the love that moves the sun and other stars. It was composed in 2021 in honor of the 700th anniversary of the great poet's death, and L'Altre Stelle was premiered in Italy at the Milan Conservatory, performed by Roberto Guarnieri in November of 2021. So here now is L'Altre Stelle, Reverie on the Divine Comedy. Over the years, I have spent quite a lot of time in Italy, teaching, performing, and composing. And I'm happy to say that my music has been frequently performed there, including performances in Milan, Venice, Siena, Brescia, Orvieto, Trento, and others. One of my compositions that was inspired by my experiences in Italy is Hodie Canamus. It is a work for chamber orchestra, chorus, soloists, and multiple trumpet ensembles in what might be described as a neo-Renaissance style. Although neoclassical is the more commonly accepted term to describe music that is based on music of an earlier era, such as Stravinsky's Pulcinella, Hodie specifically draws inspiration from the rich musical traditions of the late Italian Renaissance. So I'd like to present the third and final movement of this work to conclude my presentation today. It's entitled Psalmus in Confessione. It alludes to both the great 16th century Italian polychoral style and also to the ancient tradition of civic trumpet ensembles, which were such an important part of the daily lives of Italians in the past, and still an important part of celebrations and ceremonies throughout much of Italy to this day. But before I conclude my program, I would of course like to thank Tanya Leone and Composers Now for their very kind invitation to contribute to this Impact program. It is truly an honor to be included among so many other gifted, talented, and hardworking composers. Thank you.